It's kind of crazy to think that these are currently the only two low-end CPU offerings from both AMD and Intel. Now, I'm sure this is going to change in 2022, but today I want to take a look at both of these CPUs closely and let you know which one you should be spending your hard-earned money on. Hey, what's going on YouTube? I'm Danny with Danny's Tech Channel. If you've never been here before, if it's your first time, I like to do hardware reviews, PC builds, and sometimes I do how-to videos as well. Today I'm looking specifically at these CPUs, AMD's Ryzen 5 5600X and Intel's i5 12600K. First, let's take a look at AMD's Ryzen 5 5600X. This CPU launched on November of 2020, so it's over a year old now at this point, but it's built on TSMC's 7nm process node. It was designed for the AM4 socket, which AMD has been using for a very long time and can be used in any X series or B series motherboard. This CPU has 6 cores and 12 threads and has a base clock of 3.7 GHz with a boost of 4.6 GHz. And it has 32 megabytes of L3 cache. Pay attention to that, that's important later on. It also comes with the Wraith stealth cooler included in the box with the CPU, which is kind of a bonus because Intel doesn't do that. Now, I also want to give a quick rundown of Intel's i5 12600K. Intel launched their 12th generation CPUs in October of 2021, consisting of a hybrid chip design which is built on Intel's 7 process, formerly called 10nm enhanced superfin. I think Intel just wants to confuse everyone so you think you're on a 7nm process like the AMD chip, but you're really not. This CPU slots into the brand new LGA 1700 socket and needs a Z series motherboard because it's a K series processor, which means it's unlocked for overclocking, which really doesn't matter anyways because overclocking is pointless now. So to give you a breakdown of the Intel chip, it's actually 10 cores and 16 threads. It's a little confusing. It's got 6 performance cores and 4 efficiency cores because it's a hybrid chip design, so it's small cores and big cores, and they can do different tasks at the same time. Think of it as 2 CPUs on 1 CPU. So your performance cores are 6 cores and 12 threads, just like the 5600X. However, you have 4 extra cores to do all your efficiency tasks. So that's what makes Intel kind of have a leg up on the competition. But AMD has stuff on the back burner, I'm sure. The base clock of the performance cores are 3.7 GHz, and the boost clock is 4.9 GHz. Now the efficiency cores are only 2.8 GHz and 3.6 GHz boost. There's no cooling solution included in the box, like I said, so you pretty much have to do your own CPU cooler or liquid cooling or something of that sort. The Intel chip has 20 megabytes of smart cache, which basically just means all the cores share the cache. Speaking of cache, let's address that real quick. Windows 11 is designed for Intel 12th gen processors like the 12600K. The Windows scheduler works with Intel's thread director, which is built into the new CPUs to determine what CPU cores to use for what tasks. When Windows 11 first released, there was a bug that affected Ryzen processors' L3 cache, and that impacted performance greatly. And since Ryzen processors' gaming performance is benefited from the high L3 cache, their gaming performance was impacted as well. Now, Microsoft has since put out a fix that remedied this issue, so you don't need to worry about it anymore. So I guess it's kind of pointless that I told you, but at least you understand, and now you know that you don't have to worry about it when shopping for either of these CPUs. Now, I'm sure you're wondering, if these are the cheapest offerings from AMD and Intel, what do they cost? Well, it's kind of interesting because in my eyes, the cost is a little over what a low-end CPU should be. Both these CPUs come in at the same price now, which is $299 USD. The Intel processor, when it released back in October, came out at $319.99. They've since dropped the price on it to match the AMD processor. Are you getting value from all the information I'm giving you today? Hit that like button down below and consider subscribing to come back for more PC related content. But if you want to pick up either one of these processors, I'll leave links below for both of them over on Newegg or Amazon. Now that I give you a quick rundown of the CPUs and how much they cost and stuff, let's talk gaming performance, because I'm sure that's what you're all here for since my channel is kind of focused around gaming. The test bench is an ASUS TUF Gaming B550 for the AMD side and the ASUS TUF Gaming Z690 DDR4 for the Intel side. Both used 16 gigs of G-Skill's Trident Z RAM at 3200 MHz, a Corsair H115i Pro RGB 280mm CPU cooler, and an ASUS ROG Strix RTX 3070 graphics card. I'll leave a parts list down below for the test benches here. That way, if you want to check out the parts on your own, you can. All tests were done at 1080p, and I did them on low settings to try to stress the CPU as much as I can. That way the weight is off of the GPU. Also, I did 2 different tests. I wanted to test on Windows 10 and Windows 11. So you're getting like the full gambit of testing for these 2 CPUs in today's video. I played Halo Infinite, Apex Legends, Forza Horizon 5, and Fortnite. For Halo Infinite, the 12600K beat out the 5600X, 184.3 FPS average to 179.6 FPS average. 267.4 versus 266.8 on Apex. Forza Horizon 5 for the 12600K was 196.3 versus 190.9. Now in Fortnite, the 5600X took off. It got 409.5 versus the 390.4 on the 12600K. So the performance was good, but I honestly was expecting a bigger jump between the 12600K versus the 5600X. Because if you look at Intel's older processors like the 11600K and the 10600K, the AMD processor was beating them by a lot more than what the new Intel is beating the old AMD. Yeah. So I decided to throw on Windows 11 because I was like, well, maybe with Windows 11, what the 12 series processors are designed for, maybe that'll give it a bigger edge over the 5600X. Check this out. The Windows 11 for the 5600X really didn't change much. It went from 179.6 for Halo to 172.5. It actually went down a little bit, but it's really the same FPS. Apex Legends went from 266.8 to 288.3. Forza 5 went from 190.9 down to 182.2. And Fortnite jumped up even further from 409.5 to 433.9. The Windows 11 comparison for the 12600K was even more disappointing. For Halo Infinite, it went from 184.3 up to 185. Apex Legends went from 267.4 to 276.9. Forza 5 went from 196.3 down to 194.3. And Fortnite was 390.4 to 391.6. So as you can see, Windows 11 didn't make any difference in gaming performance on the 12600K. The only thing that made a difference was the 5600X, and it came up a little bit on some titles and then down on others. But I did do some testing with high and ultra settings because I was just curious on both CPUs. The GPU was your bottleneck at that point because both CPUs got the same FPS. Now, of course, I can't talk about gaming performance without talking about temperatures. I did a really simple temperature test. I did a Cinebench R23 test, which stresses all the CPU cores at once. It puts them into 100%, so it gives you the most heat possible on the CPU. I also did it after the gaming benchmark, so the CPUs were nice and heat soaked. The Intel CPU ran 72 degrees Celsius on average. The AMD CPU ran 60 Celsius on average. Now remember, this is on a 280 mil CPU cooler. This is just showing what a benefit 7 nanometers process is for AMD. 72 is not really bad, but if I'm hitting 72 on liquid, imagine what it would be on air. In the $300 CPU range, you'd be fine going with either one of these CPUs, whether it be AMD or Intel, it doesn't really matter. Intel has a slight performance bump in games. If you look at all the games averages, Intel beat AMD by a slight amount. So I guess technically you could say they have the gaming crown. But AMD has better temperatures than Intel, so who really wins? I'd say if you're looking for the newest and greatest, obviously Intel has the win for that because they have the best gaming performance. They have the newest chipset, which also has DDR5 support on some motherboards, and it's the hybrid chip design. So I didn't even talk about workstation performance in this video, but Intel, do not forget, has those 4 efficiency cores that can do other tasks while you're trying to do content creation or streaming or gaming and streaming, you know, stuff like that. So Intel may benefit from those extra cores versus AMD. If you're thinking about building new, I would say go with Intel. If you're actually upgrading a computer, go with AMD. I mean, if you already have an AMD system like a Ryzen 5 3600 and you're thinking about upgrading to a 5600X, do yourself the favor and just buy the CPU and do the upgrade. Don't build an entirely new system when you could just get a little bit better performance than your old CPU. I actually made a video when the Ryzen 5 5600X first came out comparing it to Intel's 10600K. And I threw in the Ryzen 5 3600 just for comparison's sake. So I'll leave a link to that video right here if you want to check it out. And as I always say, I'm Danny with Danny's Tech Channel, and I'll see you in the next video.